Good morning. This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Saying of the day, if you're going to soar with the eagles, don't hang around with the turkeys. A lot of parents tell their kids, hey, you show me who your friends are and I'll show you what you're going to amount to. I tell students in college all the time, find people in the business that you're in that are highly successful and try to have lunch with them or spend any time with them. Just watch them. You'll learn a lot. They didn't get where they are by being lazy or complainers or anything. They figured out how to accomplish things. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and a little background on Mother's Day. Anna Jarvis from Grafton, West Virginia, started it. There are others that claim, but she was the one. And during the Civil War, she had a group of mothers and a group of young women that would go to the battlegrounds, and they'd work on both sides. They'd stop shooting while they walked from one side to the other, and they did everything they can. She was a peaceful person, protested wars, didn't like wars, and thought that mothers should be recognized and that they should use that recognition to come out for peace and be against wars. And so she started, after 1900, about 1910, she started pushing for a Mother's Day. And West Virginia was the first state to recognize it. And then Woodrow Wilson in 1914 recognized it nationally. And of course, now there's Mother's Day in over 40 countries. And that she got arrested in 1923 at a convention in Philadelphia, and the candy makers were having a convention. They had some Mother's Day candy and everything, and she was so mad, the commercialization. And she had Hallmark. I mean, she just hated them. They'd have a Mother's Day cards they'd sell, and she said, you should write it on a piece of paper. Make your own card. Don't get commercialized. And so she protested to the extent that they finally had to arrest her. But if you think Hallmark cards, when they saw that, they said, this has potential. Let's get going. And they created a lot of jobs. There's a Mother's Day. Restaurants do big business. Country clubs do big business. One of their best days of the year. And then all the gifts. And so, but she started the first group she was after, the candy makers. She said, they don't need to be doing that. They're commercializing it, and that'll make you obese. And I mean, she's a tough gal, and didn't take any flack off anyone. I should have brought this up a week before so you could remember to go get your mother a gift. If you forgot it, you might get treated like I did when I missed my dad's birthday, but one day, and he said, I understand you missing it. Hell, you only had 364 days to get ready for it. And so, but it's commercial, but it's also very warming and allows people to stop and think and how much their mother meant to them. And how my mother taught me how to tithe, taught me how to pray, taught me a lot of things. But the one that stands out above all others is that when we went to see S.T. Newman, who was a high school counselor and been principal, and I think he may have driven a bus on the side. They got a lot out of those teachers. They expect them to work a bunch, and they did. But we went to see him about going to college, and he talked about junior college. I didn't want to go to community college, at South Plains College and Amarillo College, both good schools. But I wanted to go to a 4-year school, and it was obvious, money-wise, I either had to go to Texas Tech or West Texas State. And Texas Tech was a lot larger than WT, and was in the Southwest Conference, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And Mr. Newman said, what Kent's got to consider, Ms. Hance, does he want to be a big fish in a little pond, like at West Texas, because it's a smaller school, or do you want to be a little fish in a big pond, Texas Tech, because it's so much larger? When we finished talking. We went back and got in the car. We were in her car, and I put the keys in the car. She just let me drive, and she leaned over and grabbed my wrist, and she said, "As long as you live, don't you ever let somebody tell you that you're going to be a little fish. I don't care what size the pond there is. You're a big fish. Don't forget it." She said it with authority. You know, she didn't talk to Mr. Newman for a long time. She was mad at him that he would think that one of her fish was little fish, no matter where they were. And so she was always, she one time told somebody that my sister Beth, who was a banker, she was chairman of the Ag Division of the American Bankers back in the 70s. And there were very few agriculture lenders, bankers, that were in ag, not many women at all. And so that was an honor. And so, but she would tell people that Beth, my sister Hodges, that Beth was president of the American Bankers Association. And so one time I corrected her, she said it in front of me to Mrs. Howe, who had been our teacher. And she said it, and I said, "Mother, she's chairman of the Ag Division of the American Bankers. She's not president of the American Bankers Association." And my mother said, "Well, she should be." And just went on, you know, "Don't be interrupting my stories. I'm talking about my fish. You know, you just sit down there and be quiet. Let me finish. This is my story." Okay, Mom. This last week, be a week ago tomorrow, last Tuesday, the Fort Hood was changed to Fort Cavazos. And I hadn't been big on name change, you know, but that one, Richard Cavazos was a friend of mine when he was in Washington at the Pentagon and vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I got to know him. He was a Texas Tech guy, born in 1929 in Kingsville, Texas. And his dad and mother worked for the King Ranch, the Senator Gratuitous Division. And he got out of high school and played football at Texas A&I, and then transferred to Texas Tech, got a scholarship, went to Texas Tech and broke his leg in a game, and it ended his football career. But he also got a scholarship, a ROTC scholarship. And so coming out of college, he went in as a second lieutenant and was trained at Fort Benning, and it was one of the top trainees, and was sent to Korea and got all kinds of awards in Korea. There was one time they were trying to take Harry's Post in hills in Korea, and got into a big fight with the Chinese and the North Koreans, and there was he was able to capture an injured enemy soldier, and later really got on to a soldier for shooting an enemy soldier that he felt like that he could have gotten the guy to surrender, and that he followed the rules. He was a guy that strictly followed each and every rule that came about through the Army. He read the rules, read the regulations, and he went to every college. He went to War College, went to the British Staff College, any college they had within the military that he was eligible to go to, he did. And that if it said, you know, you do X, he did X. If you said you did Y, he did Y. He was someone that followed the orders and felt like they were written for a purpose. But he led a group. He was a platoon leader, led a group into enemy lines, and they took on some hits, and it lasted a couple of days. And that he went in, they were pulling back, and they're overwhelmed with the numbers, like it was 1,000. For every one troop we had, they had 1,000. And he did not leave until he got all of his guys out or recovered their bodies. And that he got the Distinguished Service Cross for that. And got a lot of different medals, including a Purple Heart. There was one time he got shot, wounded, and continued to fight for another 5 hours before he went to get help from a medic. And so that tells you how tough he was. He was the first four-star general that was Hispanic, and was first Hispanic on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Was head of the Army in the United States, over all the bases in the United States, and later served on the Texas Tech Board of Regents, retired in San Antonio. And his last several years he suffered from dementia, but his wife, she loved him. Caroline thought he hung the moon, and she went and put him to bed every night, and would go have breakfast with him every morning. And that she said she still loved him just as much as she did when she married him. And so he was successful in the military, but he was successful as a father and a husband. He had a great career. And so I think it's very fitting that they name Fort Cavazos now, and that all kinds of reasons. But I'm telling you, that's the easiest one they'll find if they're changing names. You look at the decorations he had. His brother, Laurel Cavazos, was also a good friend of mine, Larry. And Larry was dean of the medical school at Tufts. He got his, he was in zoology at Texas Tech, got his bachelor's, master's, then he went to Iowa State and got a PhD. And Iowa State's a great school, and got his PhD and became a professor at Tufts, and then became dean of the medical school. And so that was a big plus for him. And then later became president at Texas Tech, and was president for about 8 years, and was highly successful. And President Reagan appointed him Secretary of Education. He is the first Hispanic that was on the president's cabinet. You know, it seems almost unheard of, and yet that's, less than 40 years ago. And that he served with distinction under Reagan and then also with Bush, but did a good job, was a hard worker. Their dad was a cowboy there at the King Ranch, and was a hard worker, and they grew up with strong work ethic, strong family values, and not knowing English, and they learned that. Their first grade teacher spoke no Spanish, and they spoke no English, and she worked with them every day at the end of school to help them, and they were fluent in English in a short period of time. But they had a teacher that loved them, they loved her, and that she wanted them to do the best they could do. So it worked out well. Larry Cavazos was a good guy, had a sense of humor. The family asked me, Bobby Cavazos was the younger brother behind Larry and Dick Cavazos. And Bobby played football at Texas Tech and was their first All-American. And played in 1954, and they beat Auburn in the Gator Bowl 35-13. And the quarterback for Auburn was Vince Dooley, who went on to Georgia and was pretty famous. And but Bobby Cavazos was installed 3 years ago in the Texas High School Sports Hall of Fame. And he had passed away, and Dick had passed away, and Laurel was in bad health and couldn't come. They called and asked me to accept the award, and I was honored to accept the award. And Bobby was quick, had a lot of speed, ran with power, and was a running back. And that it was rare during that period of time that you scored 20 points. That was a high-scoring game. They scored 35 and beat them 35-13 in the Gator Bowl. But the Cavazos family, a famous family, and if you'd have bet on them at the first, you wouldn't have bet that they were going to have a four-star general, vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, plus the president at Texas Tech, and and the dean of the medical school at Tufts, plus being Secretary of Education. One of the things I always think back to, when those kids started school, Larry Cavazos was in the first grade, they didn't have bilingual education. They didn't have all these programs going to help them. He had a teacher that loved him, and he had parents that loved him, and they wanted him to excel, and they taught him, and he wanted to learn. And it tells you about that you can have programs, but the desire and the love of the individuals involved is more important than any program. If they set a goal of making sure that that youngster can speak English and speak it well, and to carry through with the learning, helping them and teaching them everything they need to know in that regard, they're going to be successful. General Cavazos was a guy that knew his team, and he would go and talk to the private first class, and he made sure he knew everyone and that he knew the leaders and that they understood what he was trying to do, and his troops worshiped him. They loved him, and he wasn't easy on them. He pushed hard, but he did it with fairness. He did it with inside the rules, and they did it everything he could to protect his soldiers and to make sure they won their battles. And so he was highly successful. I think he reminds me a little of that how he was thought of by his men, by the Colonel Allen Webb, the guy I mentioned from Dimmitt, that had such a following from his troops. And just to remind you, he was flying the hump over the Himalayas and take supplies to China, and they had lost several planes one week, and it's pouring down rain, and everyone except him, every single pilot reported sick. They didn't want to get in those planes, and their buddies had been crashing, had been killed, and he got them together and said, "Look, I know you're not sick, but I'm not going to move to court-martial anybody. I'm going to fly my plane over there and unload, help those guys that are fighting for us, fighting for freedom, and I'm going to come back. And Bill, I'm going to go get your plane. I'll fly it over and back. And when I come back, Sam, I'll go get you." And he went through each one, and he said, "Well, I'm gone. I'll see y'all when I get back." Everybody went out and got in their plane, and they flew, and they didn't lose anybody that night. Another time that somebody told them that they had a segregated army, and they had the African Americans, blacks were at a different camp down below their camp, and they were coming up protesting. And one of the MPs said, "Well, should we shoot them?" Well, hell no, don't shoot anybody. I go out and they said, "We'll go out there with you." No, stay inside. He went out and got everybody calmed down and said, "I want to know what the problem is." And they just talked about their living conditions, their food and everything. So he said, "Well, let's go see." And he walked down there and he made some big changes. And he said they were right. He wanted to identify the problem, then solve that problem. If you're going to be a leader in your business, no matter whether it's education or a manufacturing business, whatever, you got to know your people. When we interviewed Ed Whitaker, who was CEO and chairman of the board of AT&T for 18 years, and then was CEO and chairman of the board of General Motors when they turned it around, one of the first things he did when he was leading General Motors was go to the labor union, the automobile workers, and the United Auto Workers was the big union. And so he drives down there and goes in unannounced and asked to see the president. And the lady, thought she recognized, "Are you the guy that's the new head of General Motors?" And said, "Yeah." So we never had anybody like this come down there. And she went and told the boss, and he came out with a question mark on his face, Ed said. It was like, is this a joke? And when he saw Ed, and it wasn't a joke. And he sat down with him, and Whitaker told him, "We got to save this company. And I got to have y'all on my side, and you got to have input on what will save it." And they spent a lot of time together and voted together and on a lot of issues. And the result was they saved the company and made it a strong company like it is today. But they didn't attack each other. It's amazing what you can get done when you're working together. You don't care who's going to get the credit. Anna Jarvis founded Mother's Day. And it didn't turn out like she wanted, but it's been highly successful. Reminds us all how important our mothers are and to recognize them some way. And she just didn't want it to be commercialized at all. And that's the reason she got arrested at the Candy Makers Convention in Philadelphia. So we're raising hell with them and trying to keep them from being able to go into rooms, and had her protest card. And they kept warning her. Finally, they just had to arrest her. They couldn't hold a meeting. But she is tough. She'd seen a lot of death. The reason I think that she was probably involved in the peace movement at that time, she had been on the front lines of the Civil War, and she went to help, but it changed her mind, changed her, views on war and conflict. I had a guy tell me one time that if the generals had to fight all the wars, there wouldn't be many wars. It's easy to make those decisions. Others, and I say it's easy. It's never easy. I think back reading about Eisenhower and all that he went through in giving the go-ahead on the invasion, and seeing the number of people that were killed during the invasion. I don't know that you could do that in this day and time, because you'd have cameras, you'd have live shots, and the general public, I don't know if they have the stomach for that. This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Have a good day.